Hi, I'm Dr. Brad, he, him, with Gallagher Bassett, and I'm a champion of DEI, physical and mental wellness. I'm excited to be here today with Dr. Mary Dononhue. Dr. Mary has a sincere passion for living and celebrating life. The stress of surviving cancer has led her to an ambitious goal of reducing stress for all, and specifically, the stress we experience daily through digital communication. She's achieving this goal through a best selling book, Message Received, and through her Digital Wellness Center. A social scientist with a focus on digital well being, Dr. Mary's research and coaching has benefited companies like Microsoft, Walmart, and American Airlines. Recognized by premiers, prime ministers, and Queen Elizabeth II herself, her peers as well, Dr. Mary has been honored as one of the 18 outstanding women in tech and named one of the 100 most influential women in America. And I'm honored to call her my friend. Her work has appeared in Harvard Business Review, in columns for the Huffington Post, and on air for all major news networks. Dr. Mary is a yogi, a runner, a mom, and an overall self-proclaimed nerd. Even for a brief shining moment, she'll never forget, she was a Supreme for Miss Diana Ross. And I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Mary.
Well, Brad, thank you very much for that introduction. As you know, I'm sure my mom wrote it. I'm always very happy to just be Mary, which is great, but thank you very much. And I want to say hello to everyone. Thank you so much for having us. This is really exciting.
So, Mary, tell us more about the concept behind what brought you into this digital wellness center and why digital wellness.
Well, it's an oxymoron. And that's how we started, digital and wellness. And I knew there had to be a way to make the two work together. Originally in my work, I discovered I was hit by a car back in 2018, a couple weeks after my dad was laid to rest. And I lost the ability to communicate after 25 years in communication and being on television and writing papers and being a professor and a consultant and all of it. I couldn't even make sense of an email. And I realized at that point that the volume of information we're receiving on digital actually is preventing us from clarity on digital. So our job became how to slow it down and make us more effective on digital. And while that happened, a little thing called COVID happened. And lives were lost, lives were changed, worlds were changed. And that caused us to re-examine stress, communication, and digital.
So one of the things that came out of your creation of this concept of or oxymoron of digital wellness was this idea that we're all digital athletes, but what is a digital athlete?
Well, I guess, you know what, we should go into full disclosure here. The other thing I don't typically talk about is a few months ago, back in November, early December, I had a heart attack. Full on stress induced, we're going to lose her in an ambulance heart attack at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. Here's the thing, Brad, and I think many people out there are similar to me. We're high performers. And you know, you're that person, and I know you are, that everybody says, oh, just go to, she'll get it done, or he'll get it done, or they'll get it done. And quite often, some people classify us as workaholics, but we just know we're that person that gets stuff done. And we take pride in our work. And I know the majority of people listening to us right now feel like that too. But what happens with those types of people like me is we're on a digital, we're on a treadmill. Think of your life now since COVID as being on a treadmill. And it's set at the highest incline, and you're at the highest speed, and you're running a marathon every single day. And you're not taking any breaks. Heaven forbid you take a break. You're not drinking enough water. You're not eating enough food. And you know what happens in a marathon if you do that? You collapse. You pull a muscle, pull your back, and you can't go on any further. So what I discovered is your brain is just like that hamstring. It needs to stretch. It needs some relaxing. And that's really where I started. The other side of it is screens really do force us to run that digital marathon. And many of us, when we're running, can feel the pain in our legs, can feel the burning in our chest. And just about typically any exercise, if you're overdoing it, you feel pain. Your brain doesn't give you a similar pain. Think about being as screens all the time. And if you want to do this with me, Brad, I encourage you to. Take your fingers and bang the palm of your hand. Just keep banging in a fist against the palm of your hand. I see Stephanie trying. Now push harder, 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 and stop. What do you feel right there?
Like, I feel like, not a bruise, but I feel it. Yeah, for sure.
That's your brain.
Feedback. Yeah.
That is your brain on all the screens. And that pounding that you can feel or that bruise is negativity. And that negativity becomes a loop the more you don't get off that treadmill. And therein lies the problem with wellness on digital. Does that help understand being a digital athlete?
Yeah, it really does. It definitely helps frame it for sure. It's almost like if I'm running or doing any exercise and I don't stop to stretch, right? Recently, I walked 60 miles for breast cancer and didn't do a lot of training beforehand. And as a result, my knee still hurts today, even though we're more than a week afterwards, right? Because I didn't stop. I didn't do my stretching like I should. I didn't train beforehand. And I went out and continually did something. And as a result, have consequences as a result of it. So it sounds like this constant screen time is a very similar thing. We're always in front of the screens, continually working, continually being driven to do our best, right? To give our best, to live our passions, but they all involve digital. They all involve screens, whether it's a smartphone or a computer or a laptop or a tablet. So how do we know for sure though that we're overworking or we're using the screens too much? How do we know when it is too much, when we have to take a break?
Well, that's the problem. Most of us don't know because this is a fairly new situation for us. I didn't know. I just shared with you, I've spent over 25 years in communication. I should know. I have my doctorate. I understand how the body works. I've been part of clinical trials. I'm supposed to be able to identify it. If I can't identify it, how can other people identify it? What I have to do is begin to create new habits. And I actually started talking to my physicians about this in the hospital. It's really hard, to create a new habit right away. Hard to quit work right away. But what I noticed is, we all need that hit that, oh my gosh, am I needed? Does somebody need me? Or, oh, there's so much more work to do. We're the culture of busy, Brad. And we wear that as a badge of honor. Oh, I'm so busy. Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe how busy I am. If you go to a cocktail party with a Gen X, the first thing you're going to say to them is, hey, what do you do for a living? Because work is most important. And they'll say, or you'll say, how's your day? How's your work? Oh my gosh, it's so busy. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world. One of the things I'm constantly hearing is, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I'm so busy. And we're hearing that from people around 40 and up to about 65 in the research. And that people are definitely wearing that as a badge of honor. Now, when we go back to when do you have to take a break, think about school. When you were in school, in grade school, all grade schools typically have the same format. You get to play before you go into school. You sit for an hour, you get a break. Then you come back, you sit for a little while, and then you get a lunch break. Then you come back, and it's usually about an hour and 15 minutes. And currently, brains over 40 can usually do really well every hour. The younger you are, the more breaks you need. And the reason for that is your focus time. Now you say, oh, Mary, how did you come up with an hour? Well, what we began to do was ask people, how long can you sit at your computer and focus? When we began to see a huge shift was when people became very tired. They lacked the ability to focus as long. And they were jumping from work to work to work. So you would jump from an email to a paper you were writing, to a project you were in, to a Teams, to Slack, to whatever. And that jumping indicates exhaustion. Do you know we spend 43% of our waking day on a screen? That's an astounding fact. We're literally running half our day because of screens. And as a digital athlete, what are you doing to care for yourself? That's the question I'm constantly asking people. What are you doing to stop this harm?
So, Mary, what are some of the warning signs of this overexercise when we're reaching that 43% or even going over that, right? When we're working, when we're on screens over half of our day or almost half of our day, what where do we realize that we are doing too much and we have to get a break? How do we know that it's too much?
So there's a few ways of knowing that it's too much, a few signs, a few symptoms. The first one is you begin to get angry. And if you begin to experience this in your day, it's trivial. It seems like a trivial thing. And for me, I can speak to my experience, and then I can speak to one or two research participants' experience, if that's helpful. For me, it's when that certain name pops up in your mailbox during the day. You're like, oh my gosh, another question? Really? Like, how many times do I have to go through this? And there's all that self-talk before you even answer the email. The next thing is you begin to experience typical feelings of fight or flight. What you begin to experience is a tightness in your chest, maybe a shortness in your breath. Definitely, you can feel that you're not breathing from your stomach anymore. You're breathing from your chest. And then you notice, interesting, when I was still able, when I started to really begin to research this, there were still offices you could go in. What we began to see is people really leaning over their keyboards and their necks were hunched. And quite often they had their earbuds in. And while they were typing, you could see that the hands were very tense. So those are two physical signs. The next one, which is odd, which is the third one, is you begin to want more water or more coffee. You begin to want a distraction. You begin to want to get up and have a distraction. Again, your body is trying to signal to you that you are exhausted. It's just like when you're running and you pull a muscle, it's saying slow down. That's your body saying take a break. Other interesting signs that we are starting to see with anger we call it screen stress syndrome, and I have a paper coming out on it, is tending to view messages as negative when they're in fact positive. And research has been done on this. It came out of Harvard. It was brilliant research. And what happens is your brain gets full. So, Brad, imagine, what's the easiest way to explain this? Imagine that it's a glass of water and you have filled your glass of water, but you keep pouring water in. What happens? Well, all that water just keeps leaking out. The cup can only hold so much. Your brain can only spend so much, your prefrontal cortex, so much time with all that information coming to you. And it begins to experience trauma, like my concussion from my car accident. And when that begins to happen, you begin to experience more negativity in your day. In fact, 53% of those studied are having bad days because they're spending so much time on screens and not enough time shifting. And it just takes 3.5 minutes to give that prefrontal cortex a little break.
Wow.
Do you want to see
That's
that?
incredible. Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a sample for us?
I have a couple samples today because what happened after my heart attack was I realized bunches of things, and we can jump into that in a second. But my heart attack actually caused me to realize that if screens hurt us, then screens can help us. And how can we get screens to help us, to positively influence and impact our lives? Because frankly, I didn't want anyone else in an ambulance on a Saturday night. First of all, I tried to negotiate my way out of a heart attack because I didn't want to miss my meetings that I had planned on Sunday, and I didn't want to ruin my daughter's day by dying. Yes, I actually thought that. But my husband remembers as clear as day climbing into the ambulance with me and hearing, "Step on it, we're losing her." And I heard that too. And I actually wondered who they were talking about. And when I woke up in the cardiac critical care unit, or ICU cardiac, I realized that I had to make a few changes in my life. And one of the changes was I can write. I can write pretty well. I can create content. And I have the ability to put content and writing and science together to help people get off this treadmill and lean into digital, but to lean out of themselves for a few minutes. So the example I've created right now is using something called binaural beats, where you should hear two sounds and your brain creates a third sound. That automatically relaxes you. This video is called Breathing Back to Balance. And I created it with my wellness team in Los Angeles. So if we could hit that video right now, I invite you all to participate. But take your both feet while they're setting this up, uncross your legs, push your bottom into your chair, and don't think about work. If you're on your phone, get off your phone. So if we could play that video, Breathing Back to Balance now, it would be awesome.
This is a simple 2-to-1 breathing technique that you can use whenever you're feeling overwhelmed or out of balance. We'll breathe in through the nose for 3 counts, then out through the mouth for 6, like this. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In, 2, 3, out, 2. Now continue that rhythm for the next minute or so. 6. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now take one last big inhale and hold it for a moment. Now let it go and return to your regularly scheduled breathing. And just check in with yourself. Do you feel more balanced? Because when we consciously control our breath, which is normally an unconscious function, we literally take control of our life. Because our breath is the conduit to life itself. So if you're feeling a little out of sync, or a lot out of sync, you can employ a conscious breathing technique like this 2-to-1 breath, and it'll go a long way to get you back into balance pretty quickly. And you can do it anywhere you want. Just inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth, and make the exhale twice as long as the inhale, and you're good to go.
That was a great exercise, Mary. I really loved the imagery of it, actually, and it was so simple. I had noticed, I think, that the graphic on it reminded me of a swimming pool, even if it wasn't. And I absolutely love swimming. Now, I know there's some folks that maybe swimming isn't the best thing for them, and that's fine, right? But even if it's just imagining just a body of water, right? I feel like taking a bath or just being in a body of water even is just, it's so relaxing. Like, it helps with that breathing exercise and giving us just 3 minutes to relax, even though we were all on screen while we were doing it.
The idea is what we found with high performers and workaholics like me is, and maybe you've experienced this, sometimes when you try and do meditation during the day or during a plane ride, or, you know, if you're on a bus or a subway, for me, it's just another opportunity for me to create more from my to-do list. And we found that by engaging the senses for a limited amount of time, so there you used your kinetic sense of breathing, you used your visual sense of watching the swimmers in the Olympic pool, and then you were using your auditory sense for the direction. When people are really stressed, that's what we give them, a quick 3-minute video that causes them to use at least 2 senses. And why is that? Is because it's like a runner's high. In psychology, we call it transient hyperfrontality, which means clearing of the prefrontal lobe. And it can happen like that. And now the thing about that clearing or that runner's high is it doesn't take a long time. And sometimes when we just know that we need 3 minutes, we'll take just 3 minutes. We actually have created workouts where you are on a scale is what workouts you actually get, carrying on with this idea of being a digital athlete. And we work in 3 different areas, because when I was, lying there with nothing else to do, waiting for surgery at 4:30 in the morning, it occurred to me, and I don't know if you know this movie, but Forrest Gump lied. And in this movie, there's a movie called Forrest Gump. He says this famous line, and it's played by Tom Hanks, and he says, "Life's a box of chocolates." I was like, no, life is not a box of chocolates, Mr. Forrest Gump. Life is a Venn diagram. And it's your emotional self, your physical self, and your spiritual self. And when one of those 3 circles is out of alignment, there is no way you can have balance. And so everything we've created, and when we talk about spiritual self, we talk about being on purpose and enjoying your job. So in my case, physically, I shouldn't have had a heart attack. I was running 10 kilometers every single day. I was in perfect health. I'm checked all the time. It was part of that trial that I'm on. And as well. Emotionally, spiritually, I'm on purpose. Like I have a job I love. I have investors. I'd finished a book, but it was emotionally. For me, as an entrepreneur, I wake up every single day and I easily spend 16 hours a day on a screen. And if I don't, I won't make money. I wake up unemployed every single day. Salespeople are in the exact same position. So I had to figure out a way to get my emotions back on track, because that's when I started realizing and went back in the data and did a literature review that screens can cause us to feel and be negative. And when we're negative, our bodies don't respond well.
And we, in the insurance industry, we want to be positive people, right? We experience people all the time that are having some type of problem. I like to think of the insurance industry, and I've heard this before, as the oxygen of commerce. We run to other people's problems is what we do, whether we are in sales or in underwriting, and we're coming up with creative solutions to help people transfer their risk, whether we're risk managers and we're coming up with creative ways to help do things in safer ways, whether we're claims professionals and we're helping guide people through a loss process and getting them back to their new normal. All of these different ways are really focusing on essentially people's traumas, right? And I think of that glass analogy that you brought up earlier too, and how we're continually adding on to these negative experiences that we're kind of experiencing and really that we're running towards as an industry. And so when we couple that with the continual process of how do we do it? Well, now we do it almost all the time through screens, still somewhat in person, but a lot of it through screens. We really do need to focus on how do we do it in the most healthiest way possible, right? And it sounds like taking these breaks, these 3-minute short breaks, is definitely a way to be able to incorporate those stretches of our minds to be able to continue to still do that good work, as a way to relate this digital athlete concept to the insurance industry. Am I hearing that right?
You have nailed it. And if I may, if I can use a physical example for all of you in the insurance industry, because we've had in this house a bit of experience with dealing with very kind insurance people like yourself. But my husband also wrote some insurance exams. I think I shared that with you. And so I heard all the time when I was recovering in our room, because his office is right next to our room, is him dealing with all these people. I was like, honey, I can't. This is too much trauma for me. But this is how I think you are, and I'm going to show you how my breaks work. And you tell me if it works. So if anybody else wants to do this experiment besides Brad and I want you to put your hands together, put your palms together. I hope you can see my hands. Yep, you can. Now, put your feet on the ground, 2 feet on the ground, just a little inside of hip width apart. Pushing your bottom into your chair and lean back a little bit in your chair so you have like a lot of strength there, Brad, because you guys are pillars of strength for your community. Now, feel that stance. Now I want you to push with all your might on the floor and against your hands. Push, 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 push. Not seeing pushing, Brad. Pushing. And let go. Totally let go. Take your hands apart. Let it go. What do you feel?
Relief.
Done.
And joy, actually. I don't know why, but I do.
Because you've taken all that pressure, and that's what you get from screens. And it kind of brings that anger out in you're like, fine, I'll push. Yeah, whatever, I'm pushing. And when you release it, little endorphins start to come up and you begin to feel happy again. And that's what my short lessons and movements and breathing and video and puzzles are all designed to do, is to give you that 3-minute break. And I must say, people in insurance are intense. You're really focused on your work and getting the job done. You need to care for self. You don't have to use at the Digital Wellness Center. You know what? I'll give everybody here a free month. Try it. But you could use other things. You could keep a book by your side and just go and stand somewhere and read it for 3 minutes. Read the page for 3 minutes. Read a magazine for 3 minutes. If you're on screens and you don't want to get off screens, go look at, like myself, I look at Snoopy videos. I love the cartoon Snoopy with Charlie Brown. So I'll watch that, for 3 minutes. It's even on Instagram now. Think of ways that you can use screens to reduce your emotion. The problem with screens, Brad, is they were designed specifically to evoke emotion. And that emotion, Mark Zuckerberg, was envy. I want to be like those people in the Facebook dorm pictures from Harvard. I want to be them. Well, envy is just like pushing your hands together. It's that tension. And then anger. Later on, we've seen what social media and how social media can invoke even more anger. And then you look at feedback and you're seeing that as negative when it's positive. So your body from your clients is getting crazy. Now, that exact same thing is happening to your clients. And we identified in this paper that people in customer-facing industries are most at risk because customers are feeling that anger, that rage, and they're feeling that pressure and they don't have that release or that outlet. So that's something else you're going to have to deal with in your clients, in your client care side of things. Your clients are angry, they're frustrated. Today we're 83% angrier than we have been any other time in history. And our research draws a line to screens. What we're seeing on screens is making us angrier. And when we're angrier, we have a shorter temper. And we're also physically, our bodies tighten. We don't breathe from our tummy, we breathe from our chest. So those are some of the things that you're at risk of in insurance.
Something that you mentioned, I keep thinking about, and it's this idea of having getting angry when we see things and interpreting things in negative ways. And then also though, like the good exercises that we have, right? So how do we moderate that in our own lives? The good screen time, right? The exercises versus, what might be, I don't know, bad screen time, right? How do we moderate the differences between those?
Well, there's a couple different ways, but the first way is starting to realize there's a problem. I'll bet nobody on the call really thought about the relationship between screens and anger until I said it. And then people were like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. And then when I said 43% of your day is spent on screens, yeah, kind of is. And that's a problem. Now that you're aware of it, your reticular activator, which is located right here in your brain, will start to think about it. And you'll begin to catch yourself. And you'll say, oh yeah, I remember that lady saying I should take a break. I'm going to go take a break. What we do is we send emails 3 times a week encouraging people to just take a break. You could set up reminders if you didn't want to be part of the Digital Wellness Center. You could talk to a friend. You could create like a take a break Slack group. There's so many different things you could do. The other thing you have to realize about screens is that's how they were designed. Screens were designed for work and to evoke emotions. That's it. Now they are to bring us pleasure from Netflix and all the other things that happen. But even that exhausts our brain because the images, there's no breaks, there's no commercials. Years ago, my mom, I don't know about your mom, but my mom used to say, hey, don't spend too much time watching that box. It'll rot your brain. Well, Yeah, see, I knew she did. That's what's happening to us. We need those natural breaks, those natural little breaths. Like we have them in conversations when we're face to face, but we have them digital. So, now might be a fun time to just show another video that will help you learn to lower your emotional ceiling. Is that okay? Like, because I get this question a lot, and so we wrote this video just for that.
I think that's a great idea, a way to be able to kind of calm ourselves when we do feel some of that anger coming on. Absolutely.
Okay, let's play the video.
Hey, before we get going, this is an exercise to help you de-escalate emotional stress. But if it's serious and you don't feel like you can cope, go see a physician. Don't mess around with stuff like this. We hit our emotional ceiling when we're exhausted, angry, or isolated. It's a barrier to success, and if it isn't lowered, it has the capacity to hurt our careers and our family life. It's created by an inability to access our brain's communication filters when we're on digital. 90% of the time you hit your emotional ceiling, it's in the digital realm. And most commonly, when you misinterpret a positive as a negative. Eventually, your brain starts to react to this negativity, furthering the failing filter between positive and negative. Then fight or flight begins. Fight or flight is an acute response in the moment. You may want to leave for another job, or you feel constantly weighed down by fatigue and anxiety, which affects your judgments and your critical thinking. When you are constantly hitting your emotional ceiling at work, it starts to affect your perception of your team and their perception of you. When a certain team member's name pops up in your inbox or in your text messages and causes stress, and it's not just emotional, you begin to experience increased heart rate, sweating, a sense of panic. These physical responses to hitting your emotional ceiling are probably the easiest way to know when you're there. To stop this feeling, shut off, sit down, and breathe like a bull in a ring. Fight or flight is a primal response to modern stressors that our brains still haven't evolved to process. So when dealing with the nervous system, primal physical actions speak much louder than words. To begin, shut off your email, your phone, or turn on mute in a meeting. Close your eyes. If you have a chair with arms, gently hold on to them. Inhale through your nose as slowly, deeply, and gently as you can. Exhale through your mouth twice as slow as you inhale. Inhale through the mouth, 2, 3. Exhale through the nose, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale, 2, 3. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Inhale, 2, 3. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now take in a big breath through your nose. Then breathe out like an angry bull in quick breaths. Force the air out using your diaphragm so you feel your belly button move inward with each exhale. Push the air and the negative emotion from your head. Repeat as necessary. You will find your heart rate decreases and your ceiling retracts.
Well, Dr. Mary, that was a great video, and I love these breathing exercises. They take me back to a time when I studied some martial arts, or got to, and I studied some Jeet Kune Do, and a lot of it was around breathing and breathing exercises, and regulating your breath, and being able to regulate your emotions. And a lot of this is connected to emotional intelligence and regulating your emotions, which a lot of leaders, especially in the insurance industry, but in any industry, really strive to do at all levels, not even at leadership levels. So I really appreciate you sharing these videos with us today. What I wanted to do now is I wanted to open it up to any questions that our audience might have for you. around being a digital athlete and digital wellness and screen time. So I think we do have some questions. I'd just like to ask and see if what those questions are at this point, and see. Looks like we do have some questions here, so let's take a look.
Which ones do you want to start with? I'm happy. I just got my glasses on so I can read them, and I'm happy to see.
Awesome. Well, let's start with this first one. It looks pretty popular here. So one of the listeners here today and attendees was thinking about listening to podcasts, audiobooks, and music. Are there any auditory risks aligned with your brain similar to screens? So if we're just listening and not watching a screen, but only listening.
I haven't found any research on that because I haven't published it, but I did start a podcast. And I think that's an amazing question. One of the most interesting things I found about listening to podcasts is it helps you with your creativity because you picture the person, or if they're doing an interview to people, and then you picture their what they look like having a conversation without seeing them. So listening seems to be very beneficial. It's like storytelling. And of course, we go back to ancient times when we told stories around a fire to keep warm. And that's one of the things that too much screen time does to you. It also reduces your capacity for critical and creative thinking. So thank you. I appreciate that. I hope that answers your question.
I love that, Dr. Mary. Absolutely. I think and just being a fellow teacher as well, we all learn by sharing stories and telling stories, and it's a great way of communication. Thank you for sharing that insight. And this is somewhat similar to that, but diving a little deeper. Do you think listening to music while working, so while being on screen but listening to music, is beneficial, or do you think that would add to exhaustion?
No, it's 100% beneficial if it works for you. Like, you have to understand what works for you. For me, I'm constantly listening to music. I have music on all the time, and that helps me focus. I listen to the music, I get my work done, I can type, I can do anything. Some people, though, need and require quiet for their critical thinking to work. So when we used to have an office, I just asked that people wore their pods while they needed that time. And for people who just needed quiet time, they would just put on just different sound waves that allowed them to not hear us. There was only 2 people, but then there was maybe 1 or 2 or 5 times where my colleagues and I would play music a little loudly because we thought it was fun.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So this is an interesting question. So this individual submitted a question to say that they really do love their hobbies, their passions. It gives them that regulation, that balance between having to do some work, some office work on the computer, but their hobbies and passions are also screen related. So how do they regulate that time, that screen time? Because it sounds like this individual is going to be on the screen more than that 43%. What recommendations would you have for someone like that?
I think that, first of all, I love the question because a colleague of mine is a photographer, and not only do they spend a lot of time on Instagram doing their social media to get more wedding work, but then they're also on screens now with photography, and that can lead to exhaustion. What you have to do is regulate yourself by taking some breaks. So, for example, if you are a photographer or if you're into science, go and spend some time actually in a lab getting some data if you have that access, or go outside and collect. If you're a photographer, again, outside is always very good, even if it's 5 minutes, standing on your balcony or putting, your head to a screen outside. If you don't have a balcony, just opening up your window and taking some deep breaths. Brad talked earlier about breathing, and that's what really winning athletes spend a lot of time breathing, but you are going to have to self-regulate. Depending on your age, you would always work towards 55 minutes, quick break, 55 minutes, quick break. Also, you really want to focus on your sleep time and how you've heard it 1,000 times before, take time off screens before you go to sleep. But what's a little known fun fact is water. So if you have a book, if you happen to be looking at actual photographs, if you have anything that isn't on screens, you could simply just at the end of the day, which is the most important part of the day for you, if you're spending that much time with your hobby on screens, put your feet in some warm water just with a little salt, or get into a hot bath or a hot shower. And you literally almost wash the stress away. But the water brings down that prefrontal lobe because you're not thinking as much. You're not looking at a screen. And what begins to happen is all of that just begins to clear. Aaron Sorkin is a very famous writer of television shows and different movies. He takes up to 7 showers a day to get his creative and critical thinking going. So I hope that helps you, and good luck with your hobbies. That's wonderful that you are on screens, but make sure that you do self-regulate and take those breaks.
I learned something new today, Dr. Mary. I did not know that about Aaron Sorkin, and he is one of my favorite playwrights. I did not know that 7 showers a day. I don't know if he's in a water conservation area or not. Probably not if it's 7 showers a day. But that's interesting. I love that insight about water, though, and we've talked a couple times in the theme about water keeps coming back for a relaxation technique, which I love. Another thing you suggested too was about taking those micro breaks, like you had mentioned, where every 55 minutes or so at a max, right? Make sure you're taking a break, and that's something I need to do. I know I need to commit to it, but something that I reminded as you were talking about that. I remember not all that long ago looking at, believe it or not, my teenager's phone and seeing all of these alarms. And I was like, why do you have all of these alarms on your phone throughout the day? And she literally said, well, it's so that I remember to take a break. And I'm like, oh, that's a really great idea. And it's like an alarm, like every hour, just so that she remembers to take like a 2-3 minute break and just rest and journal, meditate, whatever it might be. And sometimes we can learn a lot from the younger generations sometimes, which is really pretty cool. So thanks for that recommendation.
Always.
This is an interesting one too, I think, in that, and I'm probably going to say this for every question because they're all interesting, right? But what do you think about taking naps? And this person, Sarita, is actually asking both of us, and I hope I pronounced that name right. A lot of these are coming through anonymously, so thanks for including your name today. Do you take naps? And I can let you know, I used to love to take naps when my children were younger. I don't get them as often now as I used to. I do find them pretty regenerative when I do get a chance to take a nap. But Dr. Mary, what do you say about naps?
Dr. Brad, I had no idea you were a napper. That's amazing.
I don't get them as often as I'd like to, but so I do, and I'll let everyone know here too. I mean, I do suffer from migraines, and it's part of my lived experience. So I do have to watch my screen time as another thing, which is another passion for mine. That's why physical health is for me. And so when I get one, part of what I have to do is I have to take a nap to get rid of it. And so that's part of my own health and wellness regimen.
Okay, so to the nap question, no. I'm like a little Energizer bunny. This is probably going to surprise you all, but I just like go, 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 go. And then when I stop, it's over. Like I'm done. It could be 8 o'clock at night. It could be 7 o'clock at night, but I'm not the party animal. I'm just like, oh, it's time for bed. I'm going to go have a bath. But here's the thing about napping, and I've been trying to teach myself to do it. As you can see, I'm in my basement office, which I'm sure many people can relate to. And there's a couch back there But what I have is a rocking chair behind me. It was from my daughter's room when she was a baby. And I read all this literature about napping, and they talk about how amazing it is. But one of the stories that really got me thinking about it was, I think it was Dale Carnegie writing about Alfred Adler or someone. But there was this famous movie producer, and I think he was at Warner at the beginning of when movies were going crazy. And, Tony Curtis, Marilyn Monroe, all those old people in Hollywood, and they were producing movies every minute, every hour. And he went to this psychologist, and psychiatry was pretty new in that era. And he said to the doctor, you got to help me. I've got this. I'm exhausted all the time. I'm not making good decisions. I don't know what to do. And the doctor said, well, tell me about your day. And he said, I go from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting. I've got to make big decisions. Everybody wants something from me. I'm writing letters. I'm doing all these things. And he said, I'll tell you what, why don't you start taking your meetings lying down? And then every lunch, do what Henry Ford does. Take a half an hour nap. And so the director or the producer did it. And he started to take his meetings relaxing, lying down, putting his feet up. He got more productive. He got more rest. And eventually you saw all of these people, if you look back in the literature to interviews with the great leaders of the early 30s, 40s, 50s, even wartime leaders, they all talk about taking a lunchtime nap or a nap at the end of the day before they go back to work. And my own grandfather used to do that. He would take a nap after lunch, and then he would take a nap right after dinner, and then he would go back to work. So the more you can nap, the healthier you will be. I totally believe in naps. Long answer, but there you go.
I love the story. I love the story, Dr. Mary. And it doesn't mean those leaders and those folks they were very successful. And two, they were moving, I'm sure, 90 miles an hour like most of us when they were awake because they had the energy to move that fast, which is a large piece of that too. There's a couple questions in here about blue lights. And I'll come back to another question that we got as well, as long as we have time for it. But I do want to touch on your feedback on screen time and blue lights. And is there any correlation between the blue light emitting from screens and there being any over risk from that specifically, from blue light? And is there any good that can come from minimizing blue light exposure? Or is it really just being on any type of digital?
I have absolutely no research on that awesome question. I am sorry. All I know is after my concussion, 3 physicians insisted I get blue light put in my glasses. They said that the trauma to the brain is mitigated by a light or some sort of special lens in these glasses. And so I did. And there's got to be a correlation. And I'm happy to go and look up some of the research on it. Actually, I could even call the physicians that I talked to about it and then get back to you if that works.
And I'll share the same information too. I mean, all I know is what my doctors have told me is minimize as much blue light exposure as you can. As my migraines started to intensify, correlated from many different things: stress at work, environmental triggers, emotional triggers from my own life. I had a very dear friend's wife pass away last year, suddenly and unexpectedly. And so a lot of different things had increased the level of migraines that I was getting and the intensity of them. And one of a coworker, a colleague of mine actually had said, had you thought about blue light filters? And so I talked about it with my doctors, and I had gotten blue light filters for all my screens. I had gotten glasses that I should be wearing right now for blue light filters. And so what had occurred was a slight decrease. So, there's a lot of research out there. And I'm sure Dr. Murray will look up some of it for us for sure for the blue light question. One last question we have here that I think we'll get to before we close for the day is culturally, we are moving towards more and more technology, more and more screen time. And we do hear sometimes where folks are, get up, move away from your desk, move away from your technology, take breaks away from the technology, away from the screens. It seems like that's harder and harder and harder to do. So what's the solution? Do we push more and more for that break, or is there another solution? What do you think, Dr. Mary?
Well, I think that's why I created the Digital Wellness Center, because we can push all we want for that solution. But the majority of us who are high achievers, workaholics, we haven't figured out how to create that structure in your day. In my work, in my virtual work now that we're not in an office anymore, I try and create the structure based on the school. So we try not to have meetings that are longer than a typical class lesson. We always take recess. We actually call it research. I actually take a lunch now, even if it's just 20 minutes or 22 minutes. But I encourage, and everybody takes breaks. Every one of the breaks that we have, every one of the challenges, all of those kinds of things that we've created and gamified, we've done for the people that really just know that they're not going to get off technology, but want to get better. As a leader in the insurance industry, for those of you, I encourage you to begin to structure your digital days for your team. And by that, I mean, don't just ignore that people are, hope they're taking a break. Actually structure a break and use different material out there. For example, you could use our material. There's tons of material on YouTube or any of those things. And take a break as a team and then talk about the effect it had on you. You're really going to have to start to think in a new way, because our world has changed, but the structure of our day hasn't. So you're going to have to put those two together, and that's your challenge as a leader.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mary, for your time today. We really appreciate it. It's been an amazing session to be able to spend the time with you today. And before we go, I do want to say, if anyone does have any additional questions for either of us, Dr. Mary or myself, feel free to reach out and connect with us on LinkedIn. You can also get a hold of Dr. Mary Dononhue through the Digital Wellness Center. They were one of our sponsors for this session, and there will be a QR code presented to all of you at the end of the session today. Please go ahead and take a photo or scan that QR code for a free 1-month subscription to the Digital Wellness Center so that you can see all that that's about. Additional local sponsors are Gallagher, Gallagher Bassett, Aon, and AIG. And I want to say thank you so much for your time and attention. Everyone, be well.